after KTLO. That's
Yeah.
it. KTLO. KTLO. Keeping the learning on. And here we are. It's Friday. It's time for another episode of KTLO. Today, episode 31. It comes after 30. It's 31. Episode 31. Season 2, episode 31. 31 weeks we've been doing this live. We were doing it every week, or pretty much every week, long before we took to the air, as it
I
were.
thought there was
took
a
to the
reason my
internet.
brain hurt.
Yeah, well, this is, well, you looked in your computer and these characters showed up. That would make your brain hurt right there.
Lots of hurt.
And today's episode is all about curiosity. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. How would we know?
What's the
I
episode
don't
about?
know.
I don't know.
Uh,
And actually, a lot of times we don't know what we know either. So the question is, what do we know? And as usual, the cast of characters, the four stalwart musketeers here, Patty Blackstaff, Greg Sanker,
hello.
Simone Joe Moore,
Bonsoir.
and your happy interviewer for today, moi. Nice to be here again on a Friday. And it's morning for us. It's afternoon for Simone. Ergo, she's entitled to have a little vino. All right.
Wouldn't be a Friday afternoon without one.
It would not be a Friday afternoon without a little vino. So we decided that this would be a good topic. And of course, it is a good topic because we're all curious about curiosity. And one of the great thinkers and speakers on the subject of curiosity was someone who is infinitely curious, at least according to him. And that's Albert Einstein.
That guy.
Yeah, that guy. Might have heard about him.
Little birdie.
And one of the things that he said is he said it's a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. And what did he mean by that? Well, and we're going to talk a little bit more about curiosity surviving or getting lost in organizations, et cetera, et cetera. And he also said the important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. So, it's a thing and you got to have it. And the question is, why do we think curiosity is important? And why don't we know what we don't know? So I'm going to start the interviewing today. I'm going to throw out a question to Mr. Greg.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. And I'm going to say, do you think people are unwilling to see things they don't know or unable to see things they don't know?
I knew you were going to ask that question because it's a difficult question. I think it's a little bit of both, really. I think that when you don't know something exists, you don't know that you're blind to it or that you're not opening your mind to that particular thing. So in that way, it's not willful and intentional. It's simply for lack of opening your eyes and seeing things that you don't see. When humans discovered metal, and I'm not going to try to teach history because everybody knows it way, way better than I, but it's like, do you think they envisioned, automobiles and trains and airplanes and spacecraft? I don't. I really seriously don't. But they saw this thing and thought, what can we do with that? And so they started making fundamental tools or tools for hunting or weapons for protection or, solving their immediate problems. And then as they discovered, like accidentally perhaps that if we throw it in a fire, it becomes harder after we cool it off or something. And I don't know how the world evolved with metal, but these things were discovered over time. It's not like somebody said, 10,000 years ago, I think I see a day when we're going to go to that moon up there, right? I don't think it was that. It was just simply like, what is this and what can we do with it? And so I think that I think mostly it is unwillful ignorance. You just simply don't know what you don't know. But where it becomes willful, because I said it was both, where it becomes willful, I think, is where we say, all right, I'm an expert now, or I'm satisfied that I know what I need to know. And we stop exploring. We stop having that curiosity about what else is out there. In fact, if we're in a sufficient position of leadership or authority, we may even shut off other sources, like, no, that'll never work. I've been doing this for 40 years. I know what's going on. For record, I haven't been doing this for 40 years. But the idea that you have your own experience, and then you start believing that is the one true way that life is, or whatever, and you become set in your ways, and you become immune to that. And I think there is an antidote for that.
Patty, you have thoughts on that? Why do we stop being curious, and what's going on? What are you thinking?
Mute.
Sorry about that. I don't know that we intentionally stop being curious. The mind has a lot of unconscious stuff that's happening. Our unconscious mind is 200,000 times more in processing power than our conscious mind. And so a lot of things add up to to stopping our curiosity. And one of them is that we get really uncomfortable when we're in a position of power if we don't know. There is an uncomfortableness to that. And so we kind of substitute humility for hubris. We have this little flip that we do. We draw more on our prefrontal cortex than we do really think about logic and rational. But there's a lot going on there. There's that unconscious mind happening, but we are distracted by design. So if you open up a browser and you haven't set it to not have the default on it, you're getting news. So you walk into your day and you're distracted before you even start your day. Your phone is set up to notify you, to constantly distract you. So the world around us is becoming distracted by design. And we're losing our time value for being able to be curious. We actually get immersed in a time suck that takes us away from our ability to really be intentional about curiosity. And opinions like to convince us that we're knowledgeable. We form these opinions based on all these inputs into our mind and what our subconscious mind does. And we're really, really, really great at being able to rationalize and justify and self-deceive. And I think positions of power can put us there if we're not intentional about that curiosity.
And going back to what I said earlier, that Einstein quote, like curiosity has a reason. So we have to pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
So Simone, what thoughts do you wake up with in the morning?
I don't know.
There you go.
Sorry.
Perfect. That's it. Moving right along.
Wow. What thoughts do I wake up with in the morning? That is a difficult one because my mind, and I think this happens for many people, my mind churns throughout the night because my prefrontal cortex has gotten out of the way while I'm sleeping. So as you wake up in the morning, you haven't really had time for some of those filters that we would normally use in our waking hours. We've gotten some of those out of the way, which is why we often say have a journal beside, pen and paper beside your bed, because that's when some of the cool ideas usually hit you, is when you first wake up in the morning. I think that's a cool technique. It's where a lot of our problems are solved, is during that process.
Cool beans. I've often thought about that, and then I realized when I wake up in the morning, I can't write, so it doesn't matter. So I mentioned before Einstein's quote about it's amazing how curiosity survives a formal education.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we foster curiosity, Mr. Sanker? How do we do that?
Well, you know, kids don't have that problem, right? Children, they don't struggle with curiosity. They think, and they ask questions. The annoying child who says, why are you putting eggs in that bowl? And, well, because I'm making pancakes. Well, why are you making pancakes? Well, because we enjoy eating pancakes. Why do we enjoy eating pancakes? And on and on and on it goes. And if somewhere along the way it kind of sets in on us that I was like, that's kind of annoying. That's kind of childish. I could answer those questions myself. And so we kind of lose the habit of asking inquisitive, silly questions. And so how do we just, I like the idea that through life we should have hypothesis. Like, I wonder what would happen if, we combined A and B in ways that they didn't, and have a certain irreverence for decorum and structure and design, which is the things that you're hinting at, that a formal education, we teach you, this is how you build a bridge, and this is how you assemble these parts, and this is how the fundamentals of physics and logic and all those things work. And so in a way we start learning that there's answers to life's questions, and so we kind of just I guess kind of stop asking them. And so I like the idea that have a hypothesis and test it. I used to come in every day and I would change the color scheme of my computer or the background window just to kind of change something about my day or my interaction with the world, so that I would have a curiosity. And some of them were kind of painful by the end of the day. It's like, wow, I'm kind of wish I hadn't picked this color scheme. It's really quite, painful or annoying. But the idea that I would follow through on that. And so I think we kind of need to capture that wonder of, well, what if? What would happen if? I wonder why. The story behind the story. Like when I went to Disneyland for the first time, I was always looking, around to see the wires and the computers that are controlling the stuff. And there's a certain sense that, it takes the magic away, but it opens your mind to, the possibility of the bigger picture that's going on here. So I don't know. I think this becomes a story of recapturing our childhood, or being bold enough or willing enough to say, I'm going to look foolish for the sake of being inquisitive, for being a person that is just curious. I don't know. I think some people struggle with that a lot. Polite society or structure, or when you have an advanced degree or a professional engineering certification, it's really hard to say. It's really hard to take an irreverent position on something, like a child would, because I'm a professional engineer. I know how bridges are built, and I know the stress factors and whatnot. I don't know. It's a tough one, Roy. It really is kind of a tough one, because you get to this point where you may not even realize that you're lacking in curiosity.
I think that goes back to something I quoted a few episodes ago, which was Pablo Picasso saying, it took me 60 years to learn how to paint like a 5-year-old.
Right.
It's to strip away all that excess stuff that and get back to the basic wonders that exist out there and try to see what they're made of. So, Patty, you talk about, you and Simone both talk about humanizing IT. So I'm going to pose this question to both of you, and then come back to Greg on this one too. We're kind of asking the world, the way that the world is going now, our industry in particular. Are you trying to digitize or automate humanity? We have collaboration and sharing, but a lot of times they get transferred into technologies. Let's go buy a collaboration tool. What are we doing essentially? Are we squashing out more of the curiosity that we really need?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about curiosity is it takes connection and interaction, right? We have this idea in our heads that we're going to manage change management by getting a change management tool. We have in our heads that we're going to take all of the most difficult problems that we have to solve within organizations, and we're going to create an app for it, and then somehow it's going to solve our problems. And the reality is this: nothing can replace human interaction. So if we're all sitting in our offices, we're all behind a desk, and none of us are talking to each other, there is no possible way that we can be curious. When we are looking at moving to a new direction, when we're looking for change, the reality is that we have this failure in that we think that we can use technology to make it happen, when what we need is collaboration, curiosity, imagination, wonder, and the investigation of the unknowns. You know, risk management has 4 areas of the knowledge categories in terms of knowns and unknowns. So there's our known knowns, and that's our knowledge. We know what we know. That's good. There's the unknown knowns. That means we know something, but we don't know the impact, right? Then there's the known unknowns. So those are our risks. Those are the things we bring up and we say, hey, you know, we've got these risks. We're not really sure either where that's going to go, right? And then there's the unknown unknowns. And that's where we're getting a new technology. We're having something, a transformation happening. We're moving to a new direction we've never done before. Those are our unknown unknowns. Mainly, we don't know the technology because we've never had it before. We don't understand the impact it's going to have to our business, but we're moving toward it because we think we have some unknown knowns that we can address and maybe solve some problems with it. And then we ignore it all, the fact that we don't know anything about it, and we push forward as though we're behaving like we were before. And I think that gets us in trouble, right? I think that poses some problems because we aren't willing to invest in the curiosity. So we got all these experts in our organizations. We can bring them forward and learn a little bit more. We can bring people from the outside who are more familiar with it. You know, I always say I act as a liaison between the vendor and the actual organization in order to help the organization know their unknowns and help the vendor be able to understand the organization better.
I'm thinking of Socrates here, and Socrates is famous for, among many other things, for saying, I'm only wise in knowing that I do not know. Right?
Wisdom is the awareness of our own ignorance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh boy, I must be a wise guy then.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Greg, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so Patty said something I think is really, really important. I think it bears amplifying, and that is that in organizations, and I see this all the time, organizations go through the motions like, oh, okay, this is our process for dealing with things that we don't know are moving into uncharted territory. And you put a plan in place, you know, this is our OCM plan, or she's our OCM engineer. So, you know, when it comes to do with people and squishy stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I'm paraphrasing people. I'm not giving my own opinion, you know, like talk to her because she knows how people work and blah, blah, blah. And we do this. But then what she said was, we go on behaving the same way that we did before. And there is the poison that we take that keeps us from growing and developing is if we believe we can solve tomorrow's problems the way we solved yesterday's problems, we're misguided. Tomorrow's problems require different thinking, different forms of interacting with human beings, and different engagement within the organization. And that is what, to me, that's what transformation is about, is changing the way we think and behave within an organization, not the technology that we employ, not the tools and processes and all that sort of stuff, but really how we work together. That's it for me.
You know, I want to turn the wheel back of time just a little bit further, because we're talking about how our leaders need to become curious and what we need them to have and how we need them to behave. And not just our leaders, our people, you know, the leaders have a play in that. I think what we need is to think about where this fear of the unknown comes from as well. Growing up as a kid, well, it's true, because I used to ask. I was the kid that asked all those questions. Why? And this is what kids do really well for problem solving, is they are relentless in asking questions. And we had a whole episode about that too, didn't we? Asking the right
Asking
question.
good questions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it took me many years to understand why it was so difficult to get the answers of, and all the response I used to get is, I don't know. And I did find out, by the way, just as an aside, that I thought that was just an Aussie thing, but it's actually in the dictionary when we answer that. Yeah, exactly.
Irregardless is now in the dictionary too.
Irregardless.
So let's just keep
Talking
that.
about a brain circuit stop. Patty's going to have a conniption now. I love that word, conniption. Now, that is exactly what happens to some people's brains when we ask a question, right? They have a conniption. And that's what I experienced. So it doesn't mean keep asking me the same question and maybe an answer will pop up. If I say I don't know, it's like, well, asking the same question the same way is not going to get you an answer. And it also doesn't mean I'm not curious about what the answer is. It took me a long time to find the reason behind being told when you ask a question, oh, don't be an idiot. Now, if you ever have a boss that says that to you when you ask a question, wow, there's some work to be done there, because it comes from fear. The fear of not knowing, because we may be embarrassed by not knowing, or we're fearful just of the unknown itself, instead of being focused and in the present. And what have we got, and how can we work towards that? So what it does mean. Sorry?
Do you want me to name names of bosses who are afraid of questions?
We probably could. But what it does mean is ask me a different question, or an even better question. Help me search for the answer, to the original one. And a good example is, you observe how many people talk about change at board level versus how many people talk about that same change out on the floor level. And that will indicate to you how many people are ready to engage in that change. There are different rhythms that we need to be sensitive to when we're asking questions and expecting answers. And there is a somatic awareness. It's a very physical response to the, I don't know. Curiosity is our best friend. It's a familiar feeling. We've all had it, but it is a feeling. It's a sense. And what it's really about is, when we are curious, it reveals our desire for information. So it's all about learning what we don't know yet. Notice the word yet.
And in a fear environment, I'm just going to jump in. And in a fear environment, that the willingness to admit that we don't know, the willingness to just be vulnerable and just say, I don't know, doesn't mean I don't care, or I don't have a body of knowledge or expertise that's relevant. And I believe, Simone, that the ability to say, I don't know, the willingness to say, I don't know, in a group of your peers or professionals, is what opens the door to the possibility that you could know. I truly
The one lesson I do know from all of not knowing is that as a leader, we need to model inquisitiveness. That little sense of, and it's not just the what if, it goes beyond that for me. We need to model not just the inquisitiveness, but we have to set up the environment and the business model itself and the practices so that we're structured to support that curiosity. Because without that, we're not going to be the agile people they're expecting us to be, and so on and so forth.
Patty?
Well, so I'm listening to both of you talk about leaders and saying, I don't know. And I agree, in a fear culture, that's a really tough one. There is an art, though, to getting around that, right? And the art takes three things. It takes introspection. So you have to be willing to admit you don't know. It takes confidence. So there is a big difference between faking confidence and having real confidence. Confidence is the ability to have vulnerability. Fake confidence is the fear of having vulnerability. And then it takes restraint. I think this is the biggest key to practice for a leader when I'm working with, when I'm coaching leaders, The biggest one is restraint. It's self-regulation in being willing to keep your mouth shut long enough to hear what others say. And I know Simon Sinek talks about this a lot, where he says, be the last person to speak in a meeting. Allow your team to tell you what's going on, and that will change the entire dynamic of curiosity. And it will grow respect for the leader. So introspection, confidence, restraint, these are the things that shape your ability to, as a leader, to be able to take a step back and be quiet. I was on a call this week, and we were talking a little bit about the pause. The pause is the silence, the willingness to let there be air between sentences. And leaders have a hard time with that. And if we can stop long enough to let there be air between sentences, the other person is able to process some things and share with us what we might not be willing to reach out and grab.
It's really
all about taking the breath,
insightful.
isn't it, Patty?
And speaking of breaths, didn't you actually figure out how many breaths you take during a vendor presentation or something like that?
I did. It was one of our offline conversations. And Greg, you were talking about this meeting you'd been in, but this happens. People will recognize this so much. You sit in a vendor meeting for 2 hours. Now, I really want you to think about this, guys. A 2-hour vendor meeting. Now, if it's giving us value, that's brilliant. But there's 1,920 breaths that you take on average during that 2 hours. So I seriously have to ask the question, was it worth it? What was the value of the knowledge that you gained for expending X amount of breaths that you have left in the rest of your life? Seriously, is that the way you wanted to spend it? And that to me is being curious about, what did I get out of that? Or what was that desire for the information to have that meeting? Did it fulfill my desires, Greg?
I'm not getting drug into this thing, because I did sit on a vendor meeting this week, and it was fairly extensive. Good vendors, good people.
But
it applies to any meeting, any interaction, any meeting. You've got to ask yourself the question, don't you? Is what I'm going to learn from this, is it fulfilling my desire to know in the way I need to know it?
Well, this is where, as a leader, especially as a senior leader who has more things to do in 24-hour period of time than I could possibly do, is I become good at, and diplomatic, of course, is, so what are we trying to solve today? And do we have the right people here to solve that problem? Is this an information session? In which case, let's get the information and move on. Is it a discussion in which we want to process or analyze it, or is it a decision? And the lack of understanding what it is that we're trying to do, it's not because I'm a hopeless analytical. It's just like, if Patty and I sit over a cup of coffee and want to discuss world politics, that's one thing. But if at the end of that conversation, Patty and I want to say, I want to be more confident that I'm voting for the right candidate, that's a very different conversation, right? And so as leaders in the organization, we can help by framing those conversations so that we're achieving the results that we achieve. Now, I have been challenged on that, because sometimes when we sit and laugh and talk for 45 minutes, we're bonding, we're building, relationships with people. And then the last 15 minutes of the meeting is like, all right, well, let's take care of business here. So my counter question to that, which I don't know the answer to, my counter question to that is, perhaps bonding should be something that we do intentionally outside of a meeting that's scheduled to discuss, vendor XYZ 1, 2, 3 or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Well, Greg, every great thing that ever happened based on good relationships.
Yes.
Every great thing that happens in an organization has occurred because of great relationships. The relationships are incredibly important. And I love that you mentioned framing, because framing the questions you can either invite curiosity or push out blame and shame, right? You can say, why didn't you do that? How come you're not achieving this? Or you can turn it around and say, given the week you've had, what is it we could do together to make this work? There's a huge difference in how you answer and ask questions with your framing. And one is about positive possibility, and the other one is about blame and shame.
So, Patty, have you ever been in a meeting where it slowly dawns on you that the purpose of the meeting is for all of you people to say whatever you need to say so that you can come to the agreement that what I've already decided is the right answer?
Oh gosh. Oh gosh. That has happened so many times, and it happens every day in organizations all over the world, right?
So just send out an email.
But do you
This is
know
what
the
I've
other
decided. Get
trap?
over yourselves.
Yeah, you know, the other trap with that we have to be careful of, though, is about roles. You know, I was talking to a few people coming up in a practitioner session around knowledge and stuff like that. But we talk about collaboration and sharing and interacting, these relationships we build across an organization to know things. Just because a person held a role, for example, as an accountant, doesn't mean that they won't have something brilliant and interesting to say around a topic in a different part of the organization. So I think one of the things about framing the question is don't label something or someone as boring just because of their title, because the second you allow that kind of filter to play out on that, you're going to miss out on a possible tangent on something that will increase, you know, the innovation side of stuff. I mean, curious people are not content to study a single subject of interest. Not, you know, just because I happen to be this or that doesn't mean I don't have other things I know about or are interested in. Instead, as leaders, we should be learning about what is the wide array of topics that fascinates ourselves and them. That's where we actually start to discover that cool spot of solutions and innovations and so on.
So I want my epitaph. I've decided I want my epitaph to say he was curious. And I'm
Curiouser and curiouser.
curious.
Which is why he ended up that way, or
Yes.
it's just the way you spent your life.
Well, it could be either. Either something went boom, or you know, my
I
dad
was thinking about the cat quote then.
yes. My dad was also a curious guy, and a couple of times went one step farther in seeking a result that he probably should have, and something went boom. But you know, what we're talking about, Greg is urging me to do a little wordplay here. There's a hypothesis, which is something that you come up with, and then you test, and you get a result, and it either proves or disproves your hypothesis.
So that's kind of that. Let's be curious. Let's form theories and test them.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the hypothesis, which is the highest paid person's opinion, right? Thesis, which is that's the meeting in which people discuss stuff, but it's artificial, and the decision has already been made. It was made 3 weeks ago, and if frankly, from my perspective anyway, having been in a lot of those meetings, is also a total morale buster.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Because afterwards, people realize that the decision was made 3 weeks ago, and this was all artifice, and that is a total morale buster. So I think one of the questions that comes up here is, what are we doing differently after we ask the questions? So we're curious, we ask the questions, we get responses, we take in the information. What are we doing differently? Go, Greg.
Wait, was there a question in there?
Well, I think, Greg, you know, what business problem are we trying to solve? You constantly remind us of that. So like Roy said, what are we doing different after we've asked the questions?
Well, so I will hone in. So I've been in situations as the most senior person, or probably the highest paid person in the room. I know what I want to do. And the folks in the room may or may not have all of the information, i.e. the politics or the organizational, nuances or things like that. But being mindful, because I've sat in so many of those as not the highest paid or the most respected person in the room. And I know how damaging it is to have that moment where you realize, oh, this is just all facade. This is just, theater for us to, you want us to feel like we were part of the process to decide what's going to happen. That's insulting, right? So I was very mindful, especially as the CIO, where there is a lot of politics at play, is I don't hold such meetings or have such conversations if it is not the sincere intention to listen to things and be open to ideas that I hadn't thought of and be willing to give them their due.
Greg, does that mean you were feeling consternated?
I was, yeah. Sometimes I think we are feeling consternated. I used to hold meetings approximately once a month. Now I forget what the cool little name was, but basically it was like I would give a topic like cloud containers, and if you want to talk about that, come to the room and we're going to talk about that. And I would ask people what they knew about it. I would ask somebody, could you explain it to the rest of us, especially at a 6-year-old level, so I can understand? And then I would ask questions like, well, how could we use that here? What would we need to change for that to be of value to us? And it became a session where, not because it got you out of work for an hour, but because people really liked getting to talk about it. And I believe that part of the key of the success of that was that they believed that I actually wanted to know what they had to say, and that it wasn't about me being the smartest guy in the room. I think it was a geek talk with Greg. Geek time with Greg, I think is what it was.
Patty?
Get or geek?
I
like both. Both work.
I've facilitated for a lot of years, and I facilitate strategy sessions, vision, mission, all of that. And in those sessions, when we're in the planning stage, one of the hardest, most difficult things I do is try to discern what's already decided and what isn't, and working with the leader to try and understand that. We have to absolutely tell people up front what's not negotiable. We have to be willing to say, this part is non-negotiable. It's either part of the business plan that was decided, one step above me or not. And then as we facilitate, we begin saying, where is the door to possibility? What are we allowed to have input to? Because we have to respect the people's time. We've taken them away from where their daily job, and we've asked them to contribute. It's a waste of their time if they're contributing and trying to hope for a better future and spend their time giving that to you, and you are not willing to accept what they have to say. So you have to say, here are the constraints. This is how we are governing. This is what this looks like. And then let's move forward. And one of the difficult conversations with organizations is strategy isn't a once in a year offsite where all we're looking at is what we're going to do for the next year. Strategy is, where does the business need to go given the business trends out there, and how are we going to ensure we're not disrupted? If that's strategy, then you absolutely need the voices at the table. But if you don't tell them up front what those constraints are, you are shutting it down before you even begin.
You made me think of Wayne Gretzky there. When you say, where does the organization need to go? And of course, the famous quote by Wayne Gretzky is, you skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the purpose of real strategy, is to say, okay, here's where we think the puck is going, and we need to be there when it arrives. And not to say, well, our competitors just did, they changed everything to red, so maybe we should change everything to red. But too often, as we know, that's kind of what happens. So this is a big question, and but it's a great question. Can we be too curious? Greg,
Absolutely.
What do you think? Oh,
Can I take that one? Go ahead, Soma.
You can all take it.
Yeah, no, I think there are lessons to be learned, and they don't come from tales. They only come from being lived. Such as do you realize, and I have no idea how much value this has to our listeners, it has a lot of value to me, that a cork can leave a bottle of champagne at a speed of 55 miles per hour, which is enough to smash through your mobile phone or even your spectacles. So I think that sometimes curiosity is, why hasn't the cork popped yet? You know, things like that we've seen.
Is this a theory that we need to prove in real life? What the
No,
velocity?
I think it's already been proven. It has been a lesson lived, not by myself personally, but I have seen it happen. So
Way to
I
deny.
don't know.
think being too
I think we
curious
can-
about a theory is can be dangerous. So, and Greg, that's where you come in. You know, we've got the dangerous risks that happen occasionally.
So you want me to run the experiment, is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. I think the cork is going to hit me in the eye. Oh, turns out it did. Can you be
Too much of anything is bad, but too much champagne is just right. F. Scott
I'd like to be
Fitzgerald.
intentional about this curiosity. I'd like to see what kinds of things I can break at 55 miles an hour with a cork.
See,
Yeah.
Pat, this is
That's
why
so
I like
much
working with
better.
you, because I have that curiosity. I do. And I think there's a spin-off program here. It's like, you know, absurd experimentations with Greg and his friends, Geek Time with Greg, whatever. You know,
KTSO.
keep
Keep the stupid on.
Oh my gosh, Roy, I do believe that you can have too much curiosity, because, you know, let me answer the question, then I'll go back a little bit. If curiosity doesn't lead to action and outcomes, then I feel like it's become just an exercise, right? And it is and I come from a family of academics. I'm the least academic, that's a fact, of everybody in my family. But you know, the idea of academia is endless curiosity, you know, ideas and theories and facts and moving the science forward. It's that bridging over into, you know, a private industry or government, where we take the ideas that academia comes up with and how do we make them practical, right? So academia, left in its ivory tower, it goes off and creates great stores of knowledge, but not a lot of practical comes out of it. Now, there's exceptions, of course. There's a lot of, you know, high tech, you know, melting pots and research triangle park, et cetera, where there's all these kind of the idea to bridge that. But the idea is that academically, you can spend all your time, you know, gazing at your navel and pondering great thoughts. And then there's but it all is action and you know, outcomes, and we never leave that curiosity. So I think there has to be that balance between the two.
And we can also spend our lives daydreaming somewhat as well. I think that as you said, the navel gazing, there are times when we can get caught up, I guess, in that world of fascination where we keep following, you know, Alice down the rabbit hole. There's that endless fascination that we have on a particular topic that is not necessarily congruent with the journey we're meant to be taking in the organization. It's taking us. However, I mean, we have discussed this on our other episodes, where sometimes taking that tangent can lead us into incredible ideas and what we want to do with those journeys. But there are times when it can lead us too far off the path, and we have to understand where those, and I do not like to use the word boundaries, but I guess those understanding of our limitations or our needs at that point.
So I'm going to insert in here that I think the word governance has a poor reputation in the modern workplace, I think, because it's often confused with command and control, you know, stifle innovation, tell people what to do, blah, blah, blah. That's not the role of governance at all. Not at all. And so if that's what you're experiencing, then know that you're not experiencing governance. Governance identifies constraints and clarifies desired outcomes. And so governance then creates a safe space in which people can be creative, can explore and experiment, and their efforts will be aligned with the outcomes that the organization is trying to achieve. For instance, a governance factor might be, we need a product to compete with our competitor that has these unique features because our sales folks say that we can sell those products by June of next year. Those are all constraints. right? So we've laid the foundation of what is it that we're trying to achieve. And then the people can go off and they can explore in that space. Now, if they can come up with a solution that the organization's leadership says, no, 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 that'll never work because of X, Y, and Z. Hang on, that was not an identified constraint. That's a failure of leadership. That's a failure of governance. So governance or senior leaders have a strong responsibility to lay that foundation where folks can safely explore. And if there's off limits areas, get them identified. That's your responsibility.
As I've said, imagination is so powerful, but only when it's applied with focused intent. And that's where I think governance really helps us. When you're caught up in a whirlwind, you've actually got something to come back to or hang on to if you're not quite sure. Wow, I'm off here and off there. And it's great to be able to come back to something like that so that we can look at where our original idea may even have more potential as a result of being able to do that.
So, according to family lore in my family, it was identified that my nephew Edward was taking after my particular genetic format when he didn't show up and he didn't show up and he didn't show up after school one day, and his older sister and mom went trying to find Edward, and they found him wandering around following a butterfly. And they said, "Oh, I think he's taken after his uncle." So, I mean, imagination has never been a problem for me. It's the governance of that imagination that has always been a problem for me. And Simone, you and I are both educated in the field of knowledge management, and we started off, and Patty talked about the known unknowns and the unknown knowns, and the no nos, and the no nos. But so knowledge management is super important, especially now. Things are so fluid. Organizations are different from what they were 20 years ago. What kind of knowledge management strategies are called for, and what does that knowledge look like? What's the structure of that knowledge look like?
The thing that I often find is that people have gotten caught up from, I guess, from a technology perspective, all the how-tos and the standard operating procedures, and let's just get the knowledge article in the system. It doesn't matter whether it's for tech or it's for call center, doing, insurance questions or how, it's like, okay, I'll just pull up the article. Everyone is so used to now, I mean, Google was just a name, but it actually became a verb for searching. So this search for knowledge, it became, well, hey, give me a 2-minute video. I can look up and this will be fine. Now I'm not, I do that myself. It's very, very helpful for when I'm beginning on something or trying to understand something. But I think in terms of knowledge management strategy, people are not treating it as part of a cultural aspect, that they're expecting it's supposed to be in the knowledge base. Why haven't you put that in the knowledge base? Well, there's a lot of knowledge and experience that only happens as part of our interactions and part of our collaborations. Not all of our knowledge that we bring to bear on our decisions is actually, step 1, do this, step 2, do that, and not understanding how that comes together. Part of it is understanding what is our nexus within the organization. If you were to take your organization chart and say, okay, well, this is where I am, I guess in where positioning wise, where everyone fits. And we can see that we have a hierarchical linear line to reporting and saying, this is where my knowledge is supposed to flow through, where it's supposed to come from. But if you were to actually put that in front of you and do dotted lines out to all the people that you talk to during the course of your day or days or week of doing your role, you'll find that the knowledge that you're using is coming from multiple sources of people in different roles, in different parts of the organization. And this is where we need to build our relationships. So knowledge management, it's the lifeblood. It's where businesses make decisions. It's where everyone makes decisions. And if that knowledge management, let's not talk about specific knowledge articles and things, start talking about where does that knowledge come from? How do we capture and structure it and reuse it, but not necessarily as a web article? It has to be understood that this is inherent in the way we think, behave, and make decisions. What is going to be your strategy around that within your organization?
And building a culture of knowledge sharing, as we all of us know, is incredibly important, especially now. Again, going back to the fact that things are so rapidly evolving now and things are changing so fast, that knowing what we know and managing what we know is insanely important to organizations. And so I was thinking today, as we've been talking about a particular thing that happened. It was a LinkedIn group discussion. Heaven help me. And it was a little blurb by someone who ran an outsourced contact center, saying that you never, ever say to a customer, "I don't know." And I thought, of course you can say that to a customer. First of all, you don't ever want to have the customer believe that you know something that you don't know. And secondly, it's not a sign of weakness to say that, as long as the next step also occurs. And the next step is, let me find out for you. Well, let's go find that out. Let's go search it down, get an answer to your question, and I will tell you what that answer is. Or
Yeah, you
let's
want to give your
discover it.
people that confidence, because you can't have a knowledge article for everything. There's always going to be a lot of things that you won't have the answer to, which is why you've got great, smart colleagues and a team of people. But you won't be able to say, "Ask me anything, I'm ready," and have them be able to step into that, because we know how to go about finding the answer. That's the key competency I'm looking for.
And have the permission to say, "I don't know, but let me find out." And that's incredibly important. So, Patty, what are you thinking as we circle around through all of these thoughts about being curious and how we organize our curiosity to a certain extent and focus it, decide what actions we're going to take based on it? Tell me more about what you're thinking, and what you're a process kind of person. So let me ask you what process you would have to kind of cycle through that.
So when I'm working on a transformation project where they're putting in a service management tool, an enterprise tool, we look at knowledge management as ownership, right? And when you talk about ownership, you talk about article creation, reinvention, being able to have the opportunity to have an owner out in the business who can help you. Not everyone who has the knowledge, certainly not the SMEs, are sitting within your department. That curiosity that's involved with setting up a proper knowledge management system is huge. You absolutely have to ask the questions that Simone and I are always asking: how might we, and what if? And those questions, when you begin doing that, how might we solve this problem? How might we shift left, like Roy is always telling people? How might we have the opportunity to get this going? You can pin down who has ownership over the knowledge through curiosity. So I just wanted to pipe into your knowledge management conversation. But I also think that when we are asking questions, wisdom is the awareness of our own ignorance. We don't know what we don't know. And I think that it is important that we take a look at asking ourselves this one question: what have I convinced myself? What have I convinced myself that I am making an opinion or a decision on? And where have I not asked for information from the people who might know more? That curiosity, that just introspection in itself makes a difference. And then reframing again, like Greg has mentioned, with the how, but what, but given that, what if? And under these constraints, how might we? And looking to that, to being able to get to an end. But the idea is not to be perpetually curious. The idea is to use curiosity to get stuff done. What's the stuff we got to get done?
Yeah, that is the answer to the question, what do we do now? And the answer is get the stuff done that we discovered as we were going through that process. And
And without those relationships and that nexus and asking those questions and things that Patty's just talking about, we're not going to get to that intelligent swarming that we need to have that variety and the diversity of thought that's actually needed to get us out of, what do we know and what do we don't know, and can we go play in our don't know so we can discover better things to do.
I love that. Can we go play in our don't know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do that for the rest of the day now. That's my day in front of me.
So Roy, it wouldn't be an episode of KTLO if I didn't bring up Cynefin, the sense-making framework. But it occurs to me that if we're constantly exploring, then we're operating as if the situation we're in is complex. And if it's actually a clear situation, it doesn't need to be explored. It needs to be executed. But if we're treating a complex situation as if it's clear, then we're acting in ignorance and we're depriving ourselves of the diversity of views that's required for us to truly understand what is this thing that we're dealing with. And so there's a contextual sense to that. In some cases, we don't need an intelligent swarm. We don't need a group of people to solve a problem that we've already solved. We know the answer, execute and move on. And in other cases, we don't know the answer. We may not even know what the problem is. And that's where we need to apply a whole lot of curiosity driving towards a clear conclusion, as in what action are we going to take to achieve the outcome that's desired. Boom.
So I think a lot of people right now are curious about how you spell Cynefin. And it first of all, let me say that it's Welsh. Therefore, it probably has many W's and some L's in it. I'm not sure, but it doesn't, does it?
It doesn't actually.
It doesn't. It's Cynefin, Cynefin. Go figure.
Yeah. And if you're American, don't try to pronounce it without hearing somebody else say it first.
That's right.
Exactly. And the other thing that's really important to understand too, which is why I say, can we please go and play in the unknown, is because it actually means habitat or place.
There you go.
And for me, complexity, complicated are the two different areas that, Greg, as you know, that we always explore in this particular area, is that sometimes when we go into that play space, we discover what we thought was complex is actually only complicated, which is easier. And sometimes we explore the complicated and you go, oh my gosh, that's complex. And then let's go play in chaos. Try and coordinate that.
And there we go. So we have, again, what is it they used to say on Car Talk? You've wasted another hour. No, we hope you haven't wasted another hour here on KTLO. We certainly haven't. We always learn from each other, and we hope that you picked up some things along the way. And we will be back with episode, 32?
32.
Next time around. Thanks. Thanks for listening. We are growing up. We probably have kids. Never mind.
Speak for yourself.
All right. We'll be back soon. Take care and have a great weekend.
Stay curious.
Absolute.